Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you for still being here. It has been a very intense, emotional day in which you've heard some incredible stories. I'm very privileged to be here with Manal because hers is an incredible personal story, as you're going to hear. She also has a lot to tell us about what is really happening inside Saudi Arabia. It's fair to say that Manal Al-Sharif is the last woman standing. She is the last Saudi woman activist who can stand up and speak out without fear of personal retribution. That's not to say without sacrifice, because since Manal launched her campaign for women to be allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia, she has been arrested, she's been harassed, she's been persecuted. She now lives in self-imposed exile, and her family is split down the middle. She has one son in Saudi Arabia, one son in Australia. The boys have never met. It's quite a price to pay for a life that's characterized by bravery and determination. And Manal also exemplifies one of the qualities that we're celebrating here today at this extraordinary event, and that is resilience. And like many of those who've joined the Oslo Freedom Forum community, and many of you here in the audience today, when she has the stage, she uses it to highlight the struggles of others. So before we have our conversation, there is something that Manal would like you to see.
The society is nothing if the women are nothing. The rain starts with a drop.
Are women equal to men?
Absolutely. There's no difference.
Manal, I saw you in Oslo in 2012, an extraordinary speech that was shared around the world. If you were in Saudi Arabia today, would you be in prison?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be upon you. Thank you for being here so late. And I do believe that if I was in Saudi Arabia at the time of these arrests happening, I would be one of them.
You had intended to go back.
Yes.
You wanted to meet your son there and drive.
Yes, yes. So I was very hopeful with the new changes that's happening in Saudi Arabia. And a lot of people were questioning me, like, why you're so hopeful? And I had a personal story about that. So when the Crown Prince came to the power, and they announced, it was exactly the time my book was launched, Daring to Drive. And 2 months later, he announced lifting the ban. So I was very happy, and I wrote a piece, op-ed, for New York Times. And the Crown Prince advisor, that means the Crown Prince himself, followed me on Twitter, private messaged me, and he said, thank you for the piece in New York Times. How can we serve you? We're here for any service. Right away, I text him back, I sent him a message back, and I say, I want visa for my son. He never met his brother. And he said, I'll get back to you. He goes to the Crown Prince, and the Crown Prince gives his orders to grant my son a visa. Finally, I had hope. My first son is turning 13, and my first son is 4 years old. I was working in the papers. I was really hopeful with all the changes, especially with the religious police that were the one behind arresting me and sending me to jail. They were put under a lot of restrictions. The power being decreased. One of them is the power to arrest. So there were these very positive changes that really gave me that false hope.
And you wrote about that. You told the world that you were feeling positive about the Crown Prince, the new power in Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, MBS he's known as. You wrote that come this June, Saudi women will be free not only to drive their own cars, but also to be the drivers of their own lives.
Yes.
You genuinely felt
Yes.
big change was on the horizon for Saudi Arabia.
Yes, because if anyone seen the interviews when Mohammed bin Salman came to the US, the interviews were very encouraging. First time a leader talks this openly about So if you watch my speech in Oslo, I talked about the aftermath of the 1979 siege of Mecca. And I mentioned that the radicals came to the power in the aftermath of the siege of Mecca. And he mentioned that. It was amazing. It was like he watched my speech when he mentioned that in the interview. And he said, we will not live in the aftermath of 1979. Things are changing in Saudi Arabia, and I've seen them. I was in Mecca. Imagine in Mecca, it's the holy city of Muslims. So why Saudi Arabia is important, just to go back, it's the birthplace of Islam. So you have 1.6 billion Muslims look up to Saudi Arabia and look up to Saudi women. So any changes is really not changes for Saudi women only. It's changes for the Muslim nation.
But what you have been campaigning for was change on a fundamental level. It was about driving, it was about the guardianship system, it was about changing
Yes.
the way society worked in Saudi Arabia. Do you think you were fooled with the promise of change?
So that's interesting because I can't say anything. Unless I can talk about bravery all I want. Unless I'm put in a battle to prove that bravery that I've been outspoken about, I can't prove it. So I was very cautious, even when I wrote the piece in the Time magazine, when they asked me to pin a piece about him when he was named one of the 100. I believe he's not one of the 100 most powerful people in the world. I believe he's one of the 10 most powerful people in the world today. And that's how influential and powerful the monarch in Saudi Arabia. He's the de facto leader of Saudi Arabia, not his father, the king.
And let's talk about power, because as we were discussing what we wanted to say, we talked about the fact that you're professionally au fait with information security. It's what you deal in.
Yes,
You
I have
know
a
how
job,
these
by the
things
way,
work.
yes.
Yeah, that this is your profession. And you were saying, you know, when we look back to the days of, Arab Spring hopes, of daring to drive, dreaming about driving, it was activists using social media.
Yes.
And the Saudi state, you were telling me about the ways in which it has raised its game tremendously, especially in the last year.
Yes, so everyone noticed the Arab Spring, how it happened. Social media is really made to connect people, to connect with your old friends, but in the Arab world, we used it to ignite revolutions. We understood the game. We used it because we were living under very heavily censored societies, media that's controlled by the government. And now we have this platform that we can use to speak up, to campaign, to call for action. They didn't understand the power of that. Social media for them was just like for kids. It's just, they understood that power very well. They didn't even play with the rules of the game. They actually cheated. So they created all these trolls. Very famous story here, the 200,000 tweets by trolls, by fake accounts that have been led by the Kremlin army, that led to at the time of the presidential election in 2016. It was deleted 2 years later. This is how powerful when you understand the rule of the game, to just flip the table and use the same tools that was used for liberation. You can use it to undermine and really jeopardize the democracy process in the
And
world.
when you look at some of the activists who've just been arrested, some of your friends, your
Yes.
colleagues, your fellows, you were saying to me, it's not just about what you put up now, it's about what you put up years ago, what you put up and then deleted years
Yes.
ago. They're following you.
Yes, so I said this morning that my stars are aligning. Please go to the New York Times and read my piece about the dangers of digital activism today. Any information you put online doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the company that you're using their application or their website or their social media. It's out of your control. Even if you put all these privacy settings that no one can see it, but your own friends or the people you choose, forget about that. Once it's out there on the internet, it's public. And to understand that our Twitters the government, the GCC governments, they started going to the archive of our old tweets, and they pulled that to build cases against those activists. So we used tools to delete our old tweets so they don't use it against us. Guess what? Twitter this year in February decided to give you an API. API is just like a service where you can ask to access the archive that goes all the way to 2006 of your tweets. So if you delete your account and delete your tweets, even if you delete your Facebook account, guess what? Someone out there have the information that you posted on that account.
And that's happening now to Saudi women in jail.
Yes, so they build, so let me just talk about these women. So these women, one of them, I just want to talk about one of them, Lujain al-Hadloul. Lujain al-Hadloul is a young girl, and she's a social media influential. She was driving from Dubai, where she lived, and she's a personal friend of mine, she lived in my house, to Abu Dhabi to her university. She was kidnapped. She was put on a private jet and flew to Riyadh. They flew her to Riyadh. Her husband was in Amman, in Jordan. He was kidnapped. He was put in a commercial airline, the only passenger. He was flown to Riyadh, and that was in March. All these activists today are locked in prisons that no one knows where they are. They have one phone call with their family. There are no charges pressed against them. They have no access to lawyers. And the charges, there were no charges. There was only treason, and treason is 20 years in jail. And the only treason they had is they loved their country so much to campaign for equal society between men and women.
And then what can you do for them? We're talking about this here today, but does it help if they've got connections to you, or do they need you to be quiet, or to pull off a Facebook friendship, or well, I doubt you use that anymore. But it's frustrating, isn't it? Because can you speak out on their behalf or not?
It's disheartening. When I was in jail, they made sure that I signed so many pledges. I forgot how many pledges I signed, my family too. And they ask us not to speak up when I leave jail, not to talk about what happened, not to give any interviews. So they shut you up, and they make sure they use also your family to shut you up. Those women today, their families blocked me. I call, no one answers me. I'm trying to get information about them, so I bring it up. I had their pictures on my Twitter account. I had someone from Aziz Al-Yusuf, who's a professor, a retired professor, 70 years old, a grandmother. She's in jail today. For her activist. They contacted me, and I said, I don't trust you that you are her family. And I asked about her children's names. Give me her children's names. And he listed everything, like all the way to the third, fourth grandfather. And I was shocked. Their families are intimidated. Lujain's husband, he's also a good friend of mine. He talks to a mutual friend. He wasn't even able to talk to me. He talked to a mutual friend, asking me to delete the tweets I wrote about him and Lujain. So this shows you how they are intimidated. When I left jail, do you think I stopped talking? I didn't. I made sure. I filed a lawsuit against the traffic police, and I wrote a whole book about it. And I went and I gave up my job to give my Oslo speech, my Oslo Freedom Forum speech. Government or dictatorship. So freedom of expression, why it's very important, is the foundation for any democracy. You cannot build a democracy if you crack down on the freedom of expression and you don't accept. It's just talk. It's peaceful protest. It's digital protesting.
So in terms of what you can do for those inside Saudi Arabia who are trapped or who are out but feel they cannot talk, professionally, I mean, your message today in the New York Times, the dangers of digital activism, professionally, your message seems to be stay off social media. So what then?
Yes, social media, if you're an activist, don't use it to connect with your other activists. Because you put yourself in danger, you put them in danger. Just use it as everyone else are using it. When you use it, you're really putting yourself on the line. Do what Canada did. So if you didn't hear about what Canada did, they just posted a tweet condemning the arrests. Saudi Arabia, the same day they posted the tweet, they said this is a blatant, is that the word?
Yeah.
Blatant interference in our internal policy. And they literally, they kicked out, they expelled the ambassador, the Canadian ambassador. They gave him 24 hours to leave the country. And they cut the aid for around 10,000 1,000 students, Saudi students, and they called other 5,000 who are there for medical treatment, and they stopped, they seized the airline.
So this is a very determined
They were giving an
government.
example. If you talk, if you criticize, this was going to happen to you. And guess what? U.S. when they asked the U.S. what do you think of what happened, what Saudi Arabia did to Canadians, they didn't want to even comment about it.
It's a
UK
picture
is the
of
same.
it's a picture of despair, really, isn't it? So I want to ask you at the end of our conversation, and as this day draws to a close, some of the themes here are about forgiveness, about healing, and about resilience. And how can you stay resilient, and how can you advise others to stay resilient? What drives you on?
That's so beautiful, the forgiveness and healing. Can I talk about these two? In your life, there will be things, bad things happen to you, sometimes from the closest people in your life. And I felt like I was betrayed by a whole country when I just challenged the status quo. I think the most challenging, the most courageous, the most rebellious thing I did in my life wasn't driving a car or removing my hijab or speaking against the status quo. It was really forgiving those who did me wrong. And forgiveness is very important because you do it for yourself first. Because it weighs you down, that hate, it weighs you down, that anger. And when you shed that, guess what? You really strip them away from their strongest weapon, is to intimidate you, to make you afraid, the feel of guilt and the feel of anger. But about resilience, it's an interesting story that I met the Dalai Lama. We were speaking in the same panel, and we had breakfast that morning. And his interpreter told him who I was, and he looks at me. I was printing these papers of my friend who was in jail for disobedience, for leaving her abuser house. And I was going to talk about her. I was so mad and angry, and I was going to talk about I am my own guardian. And he looks at me, and he says, what you do is important for women. He didn't say Saudi women. He didn't say women in your country. He said, for women. And that really shocked me. Like, does he really know who I am? Like, why did he say that? Well, that was huge for me. And the minute I realized we're all connected, and that's a Buddhist concept, that when you hurt someone, you're doing that to yourself. And when you fight for a right, when you speak up, you're speaking for those who, as Thor mentioned this morning, for those who are voiceless, who are most vulnerable in your societies. And I think that what builds resilience. Resilience means when you are down, you forgive, you get up, and you continue. For me, that is resilience.
And you do exemplify it, and that's why we are so glad to have you here
Thank
today.
you.
Manal
Thanks for
Oshari.
that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.